Today we're painting on tote bags and we're testing 3 different types of paints. Fabric paints, dollar store craft paints, and paint markers to see which ones work best on fabric. Plus, I'm going to share 7 easy designs to inspire you. Let's go. So for the first step is you want to have your tote bag like really nice and smooth. So what I like to do is just run a hot iron right over it just to smooth out any of those creases as much as I can. Now the next step is I'm going to place a piece of cardboard or paper inside the bag. Now the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want any bleed through to the other side. So that's important because sometimes the paint can seep through your layers and then it will like go onto the other side of the bag, which you don't want. All right, so the next step is I have this free printable that I'm going to be using as my design. So I want to show you a trick here. So once you've printed it out, on these tote bags, they're really transparent. So that's going to be working to our benefit here because if you pop it inside of the tote bag and then you just lay it down, you can actually see the design. And now I'm going to tape the border so I can see the outline of where that border is on my design below. So I'm going to just tape along that. So now the border is nice and taped. Now we're going to work on the sun rays. All right, now that everything is nice and taped, I'm going to be painting this design with these fabric paints by Alpha 6, and I'll leave a link in the description below if you're interested. Now I poured them out on my palette and they are super runny. So next time instead, I would actually put them in a palette like this. So they're nice and contained. But I'm not going to waste these paints. I'm going to work with it. So in terms of coloration, there's a pink, a yellow, a peach, another yellow, and an orange. So to start things off, I'm going to pick up my paintbrush and just start painting them in, my sun rays. And I haven't prepped this fabric at all with anything. I'm painting right on this tote bag. The only thing I've done to this tote bag is iron it. And you want to apply a really thin layer of paint opposed to like a gloopy layer. This is just going to help give a really smooth finish. I feel like the color is really, really bright and saturated. So we'll see if the dollar store paints are saturated too. I've heard when I was doing a little bit of online researching that the fabric paints tend to be a little bit more saturated in color, so I want to test that out. And it's really just seeping into the fabric, which is nice. And the fabric is really soaking up the paint. I'm actually surprised. I thought it would soak up a little bit less, but it's really, really getting in there in the fibers, which is good because that's what we want. But you might have to pour some more out on your palette if you run out. So I went ahead and added a second layer to some of the rays here. I found some of them were, the tote bag was still kind of poking through and it wasn't a solid color. So I applied a second coat, but not to all the sun rays, just to the more of the darker ones. And another thing I forgot to mention is I was reading that it's important not to load your brush with too much water when you're painting on fabric, because what can happen is you could dilute that paint and it becomes really liquid and then it seeps through the fibers, and instead of getting nice crisp lines, you're gonna get a lot of bleed through. All right, now we're gonna take off our masking tape and pray to the painting gods that we don't have a lot of bleed through. So far, so good. So I'm really amazed with this masking tape method on the fabric. And I think it's actually a combination of the consistency of this paint, but I think also it's painting on fabric is different than painting on canvas. And I think that this masking tape method just works better on fabric for some reason. All right, for the sun, I just cut around the masking tape that we made originally, and just to make it easier border. And then I'm just gonna take some orange paint very close to the sun rays at the bottom here. just want to quickly show you what to do just in case you get some bleed through on your bag, or even if you get like a drop of paint. So I got an orange paint dollop right on the side here. So what I'm just gonna do is grab some white paint or any paint that matches your tote bag. And I'm just gonna paint over top of it. So you can fix stuff on your tote bag by just covering it with the base color, as close as you can get. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect, but as close as you can get, and then it just covers it right up. Okie dokie, so now we're gonna finish off this design with writing the words at the bottom, rise and shine. And since we have the stencil below, this is going to be a super easy step. So I'm going to first trace it in with pencil and then fill it in with paint. Now it's on to our second design. So for this one, I'm going to be testing the dollar store paints, and I've also have my design inside my bag and taped to that cardboard. So what I'm gonna do is I have a nice bright pinky red here, and I'm just gonna start painting in these, they're like abstract Mattise style flowers, which are really, really fun and easy because they're like super abstract. And the color is really nice actually. It's not as unpigmented as I thought it was going to be, considering they're dollar store craft paints. They're going on with the same kind of consistency as the fabric paints, which is good. I'm going to see if after I do one coat, if I need another one. Sometimes when the paint dries, you really see that you need another coat. It didn't really fully cover everything, so I'm gonna wait till it fully dries to see. All right, now that I'm done the flowers, I actually needed just a tiny bit of touch up, just like I did for the fabric paints. So I went ahead and just made a second coat over some of the parts that were a little bit rough. And now I'm gonna continue on with the stems. So I have a little bit of green and light green, and I'm just gonna take my detailing brush and just go over those stems. And I've also traced it with a pencil just to make it a little bit easier to see the lines, because I found it was a little bit tricky. So I basically just went and took my bag right up against my window, and the sun shining through the window made it much easier to see all the contrasting colors, and then I could trace it with a pencil. Now that we're done all the stems and the word, I'm gonna go in and add a background. And this is a little bit backwards. The benefit though of doing your background after you do your painting is that you can fix any shapes that are bugging you. So you can paint right over top some of these flowers. So I'm just gonna put some music on and paint in my background. And then I'm gonna show you guys what it looks like afterwards. All right, so now I'm just gonna take off the tape to reveal the final design. All right, the next paint we're going to test is paint markers. And I'm going to be using like a slew of paint markers I had on hand, Posca's Art X and also Alpha 6. And also to mention, they're acrylic and water-based paint markers. And I'm going to leave the link for all these printables in the description below. And I'm just going to pop that into my tote bag. Also to mention too, I'm going to be using a monochromatic color scheme for this design. So basically what that means is I'm going to be sticking to one color, but in different shades and tints. So for this one, I'm going to be using different shades and tints of blue. So I'm using this Art X paint marker, and it's going on really nicely. I feel like I have a lot of control over where I put my strokes. And I think that's because we're so used to writing with pens and pencils ever since we're younger. So it just comes natural to us. And also the coverage is really good as well. I feel like I'm just like having to color over top, and then even the parts where it's not so covered, I can just go over it right away, which is really nice. With the paints, I felt like you have to let it dry and then go over top. And I feel like the Poscas give a really nice coverage on the first coat. If Poscas are a little bit expensive though, and when you're painting on fabric, you're using a lot of paint. You need a lot of paint to get coverage. So this can tend to, if you're doing a really big design, this might cost a lot of money. So that's something to keep in mind. Now that we're done testing all 3 paints, I just want to give you the final verdict and which ones I would use for my projects. So let's start out with the fabric paints. These worked wonderfully. They gave a really beautiful vibrancy, and they were mostly one coat. I just had to use a second coat on certain areas, which was really good. The only thing with these paints is that they're super liquid, so you have to use a palette that has cups in them opposed to the flat palettes. Now over to the dollar store paints, these were a huge surprise. I thought they weren't going to be as vibrant and I was going to need more coats to get the same coverage as my fabric paints, but it turned out they were very equal. So they were just as vibrant, I found, as my fabric paints, and I needed about 1 coat for these as well. So they were very on par, which was surprising because these are much cheaper. So I did a little bit of research, and because fabric paint is designed to be used on fabric, it's designed not to fade and crack over time. So there is a risk if you're using the cheaper quality paints that over time the colors could fade, it could crack and peel off. So that's one thing to keep in mind depending on your project. Now over to the paint markers. These worked fabulous. I absolutely love paint markers. The only thing is that they are super expensive, and especially if you have a big area that you're trying to cover, a big project, these can really start adding up. So in terms of what types of projects I would use these on, if I was making a tote bag for a customer or as a gift, or if I wanted to make sure it was going to last the years, I would use the fabric paint, hands down. Now for projects like if I'm making a tote bag for myself or for kids, even for classroom projects, the dollar store paints hands down I would totally recommend. They worked awesomely. And finally, for the paint markers, I would use these in conjunction with the paints. So I would do my bigger design with the paints, and then I would do the fine details with my paint markers. And even words and quotes, I would definitely do with the paint markers as well. Now the final step for our painted tote bag is to seal our fabric and our paint with some heat, and that's just gonna set the color on our fabric permanently. Now before this step, you wanna make sure that the paint is dried completely and it's not wet at all. And then I'm just going to take a parchment paper, and this just protects the fabric and the paint from the iron. And I put it on cotton, and I'm just gonna apply that heat for a couple minutes right over my design. And that's just gonna seal everything together. So now I just want to share a few extra ideas I painted on tote bags over the years. I haven't made a tutorial for them, but they're pretty easy to recreate. So this one here is just simple daisies on a teal background. This one here is a easy peasy cupcake, and I actually have a tutorial on a cupcake on this channel, so you can take a look at that. And I just added the words frosted happiness because cupcakes just make me happy, and also sprinkles. And then this one is my messy mandala because they're not perfect circles. They're irregular circles, and then I just filled them with whatever doodles came to mind in the moment, and then filled them in with the colors that came in with the moment. So it's very in the moment kind of design. And this is my beautiful bumblebee design, and they're just simple they're simple oval bumblebees, and then I made the buzzy lines to spell out the word beautiful. And then we have the rise and shine design that we made in this tutorial here. This is the finished design. We have our wild soul with our Mattise tulips. If you're looking for more fun things to paint on, then check out the CD painting tutorial right over here. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, sending lots of peace, love, and color your way.